living your truth are self-sabotage and escapism. And it's really what we're going to get into this evening. So decades ago, I received a gift of 8 really elegant wine glasses. I mean, beautiful thin glass with like 8-inch stems. Hey, Phoebe, great to see you. Oh, currently in Georgia, Jim. I did not know that. That's great. You got some warmth down there, I'm sure. Beautiful glasses. Just the glass was so thin and gorgeous, and they were really dramatic, the kind that would have made Olivia Pope proud. They looked so dramatic on the table, filled with wine. However, they spilled constantly, and they broke regularly, and they weren't even really that easy to drink out of because they were so round. And then when you went to drink out of it, the hole was really kind of small. So their design was not actually functional. So when we would have company and a glass would break, which inevitably it would, I would pop over to Crate and Barrel on Broadway in Houston and buy the one replacement instead of just buying a new set. Now, why? Because I had a set and I thought it was pretty, and one glass was easier and cheaper to replace than the whole new set. But I probably bought a dozen glasses over time. Our lives can be exactly like that. We have things that don't work. But instead of change, we keep fixing the one small thing that maybe breaks. For instance, we work, let's say, too many hours a week. And then on the weekends, we drink too much, we stay out too late, and then maybe we get sick. We go to a doctor, we use that Western medicine logic, which throws bombs at everything that is perceived as bad. And that leaves us feeling run down, and then we end up maybe missing work. And we sleep for 2 days, and we call that getting well. And then we start the whole thing all over again. And it usually takes something big to get us to change, to get us to shift. Big like maybe a quarantine. So now, as we begin to re-enter, what will our new way look like? There will be clues, like the glasses spilling over and breaking, that may let us know this is not working for me. One really interesting verse is found in Lamentations 3:40, and it says, "Let us examine and test our ways and return to Adonai." So I'm going to break down this verse a little bit because it's kind of the key, it's the foundation of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So the Talmudic writers connect this verse in Lamentations to things that are painful that happen in our lives, and then we should examine ourselves. And that self-examination and returning to the ways of God go hand in hand, which is what the rabbinic scholars say about this verse. So let's kind of break down this verse, and we're going to look at the ancient pictographs, which was before there were letters, Hebrew letters. There were pictographs, and the pictograph of each letter kind of gives us insight into the meaning, the deeper meaning of the word, because it's very visual. So the word examine is the word chapas, and that means to search out or be searched out or to be exposed, chapas. So the first letter is ket, which is an ancient pictograph of tent walls. And tent walls were, what that meant was it was our protection. So it kept us in safe. The second letter is pei, and that's the word picture of a mouth, and it means to speak. Now, speaking, just like now, is very important because it communicates our convictions, our values, our heart, and it also carries our authority with it. And the third letter is the letter samek, And that is a word picture of it's a sharp instrument that pierces. And Samek is oftentimes connected to a picture of a thorn bush that was used by shepherds to protect their flock of sheep. So this word, examination, is powerfully protective, and it has to do with our speaking, but it's also not necessarily comfortable because of this last jabby letter here. Another word here in this verse is the word test, and it's the word kakar. And that is, again, the picture of a tent, chet, or wall, which keeps us safe. The word letter kaf, which means sun, horizon, revolution, or time. So this is the ancient picture of the sun that's kind of setting. And so it has to do with penetration, and it also has to do with time or seasons. And the last word picture is the letter resh, and it means it's the head, the beginning, or the first. So this word actually means to penetrate, to investigate the cycles. So again, we're to examine and test our ways. The Hebrew word for ways is the word derek, and it means the path or steps of your life. So, why do you do the things you do? So we see with these two words, examine and test, it can be jabby, right? It has to do with us speaking. It has to do with us taking the initiative of looking beneath. Why do you do the things you do? We will sometimes examine and test the things we do, like, oh man, I shouldn't have spent that much money, or I shouldn't have drank that much, or I shouldn't have been that snippy with my sister. Sometimes we examine and test what we do, but rarely do we search out, expose, poke, talk through the cycles of why we do what we do. So the verse again, let us examine and test our ways and return to Adonai. The very process of searching, of examining, of speaking is our returning to truth. And it's the Hebrew word shuv, which we know, which is turning away from deception and turning back towards God or towards truth. Now, here's what we all need to kind of wrap our brains around. We already kind of know this, but let's remember it. Living out of alignment with your own truth will manifest unintended consequences. Let's just read that one more time. Living out of alignment with your own truth will manifest unintended consequences. Now, the thing is, when we don't live out of our own truth, stuff is going to happen, okay? There will be consequences of not living out of our own truth. Guaranteed, okay? I'm going to talk about two behaviors that happen that we often see when we're not living out of our own truth. There could be many, but I just want to talk about two. And these two are ones that I'm kind of hearing lately, so I kind of wanted to drill down on them. So the first is self-sabotage. Self-sabotage. Now, maybe you're already kind of feeling this in your own life. I don't know. Maybe not. Hey, Aaron, great to see you. I'll watch on the replay because I'm on a plane. Oh, love you, Aaron. Let us know where you're going. We'll pray for a safe trip. Love you. So self-sabotage is a big one. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of people that I personally was involved with that kind of displayed self-sabotage. And we can kind of unpack what happened with that. And if you felt self-sabotage in your own life, give me a thumbs up. And maybe let me know how you're able to pull yourself back on that. But we're going to talk about that. 3 examples. The first was a woman with a dream interview for a company all of her colleagues would just die for. And in fact, she called me up when she got the interview and she said, oh, please, please, please pray for me. This job is really everything that I would ever want. And it's with a company that everyone would love to work for. So she had the interview, let's say it was on a Tuesday, and she sets her alarm for 2 hours before she even has to leave, giving herself plenty of time. She gets up, she gets dressed, hair and makeup, drinking coffee in her kitchen. But then she notices that underneath of her sink, she notices a little drop of water coming down behind the door. And she opens up the door and she sees that her sink pipe is dripping. Underneath the faucet is dripping. And so she decides that she's going to fix it. Now the drip was just maybe a drip every 30 seconds. She could have put a bucket underneath until after the meeting, but she decides she's going to fix it, making it worse, in fact, breaking it, and then the water is gushing, and she doesn't know how to turn the water off behind where she broke what she broke, and so she had to call up her super and wait for him to come in order to fix it because she was having to change the bucket like every 5 seconds or so. And so she was not able to make her appointment. True story. Or the actor that finally had the audition of his dreams, another true story, and went out the night before to celebrate because he knew he was going to nail it. He had it in the bag, his exact words. And so he was celebrating the night before, drinking and eating all kinds of sugary things. And then after 2 hours of sleep, going to the audition and trying to read and sing and dance his best, which he was not. And he didn't get the part. Or another true story, the 15-year-old man who was young man, who was living in a horrible situation in Brooklyn and was part of a church that I was involved with, that I was a pastor in. Really horrible situation. A great kid, a great heart, did good at school. And we found him a host family in another state that said that they prayed and that their church prayed and they asked God, should we take in this young man? And everybody said, yes, we should take him in and see God's goodness in this young man. And so this young man moved into this new home, got into this amazing school, and within a few weeks, he slept with his host's niece and also the pastor's daughter. And despite all that praying and God told them to have him come, apparently God changed his mind when the young man was having sex with the girls, okay? I'm just saying. So he comes back to Bushwick, Brooklyn, and I said to him, what happened? Yeah, I mean, what happened? It's not like you do that here. And he said, oh, that's just what I do. And I said, no, it's not what you do. What happened? What really happened? And he shifted to, I don't know why I did that. Paul said it really well in Romans 7:15. I don't understand my own behavior. I don't do what I want to do. Instead, I do the very thing I hate. Hello. Paul said it best, right? Self-sabotage. Do you do that in your own life? Hey, Ryan, great to see you. Hey, Randall, good to see you too. Have you experienced this self-sabotage where we actively or passively stop ourselves from realizing what we think we want? Now, this oftentimes happens, this self-sabotage, when we are not truly living out of our own integrity. Have you felt this? Give me a thumbs up if you have, if you've actually experienced it. Jim says, in relation to the actor example, another take on that self-sabotage, working a gig the night before a big audition, yes, and thus not being rested and ready for the said audition. Been there, done that. Yep. All kinds of things, right? So, and again, this could be passive or it could be actively, both ways. But it often happens when we're not truly living out of our own integrity, meaning something is off. It can be as simple as we don't think we deserve it, which is the issue with the young man who sabotaged his opportunity in his new life. Or it can be we'll fail if we get it, which was the instance with the actor. Or we don't really want that life. It's the dream of other people, but it's not my dream, which was the issue with the woman that stopped to fix the leaking sink. So we destroy it before we get it. Now, again, we can do this subtly, like the actor who just kind of said, I just had a bad audition, it happens. Or it can be a crash and burn destruction, like this young man who decided to have sex with the daughter of the pastor, right? He did the niece first, and then he thought, maybe that isn't good enough. To get kicked out of here, I really need to sleep with the pastor's daughter. And it worked. Self-sabotage is a warning sign. When you do it, you need to notice why. Examine, like the verse we read in Lamentations, examine and test the road you're walking on. What's off about this road? What is not the truth? What am I feeling in my body? Now, this can be a lie that you've believed about yourself or about the world or about God that has become sort of part of your operating system, but it's not really truth, and your heart knows it. Or it could be something that is not who you are, that you're just feeling pressured to do because it's the right thing. So there's a sabotaging that's going on. Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca, good to see you. It's more like I don't know how to function without a looming deadline. Yeah, and only you would know whether that's self-sabotage. Some people actually function better in that way because they like the stress, which they get the adrenaline rush with. Some people, it is self-sabotage. So only you would know that, Rebecca. Your heart would know. Jim says, what if the thought is, this is my dream, but life and situations intervene, such as the leaky pipe and job interview situation? The thing is, again, this is really a you question, because with that leaky pipe, she did not have to fix it. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to break that down in a little bit. But it's really a you question, because sometimes life does come in. Absolutely. Not everything is self-sabotage. Usually, though, a good clue that it's self-sabotage is when you find it's a pattern, especially when it comes to a certain area. Then that could be a good clue. Rebecca says, I think it's undiagnosed ADHD. It could be, and certainly ADHD is not self-sabotage, okay? That's a brain issue, and it's not self-sabotage. But this is something that your heart will really lead you to. You'll know. And again, passive is sometimes harder to know. But when you see that things always happen, right? Every time something happens, then we may ask that question. Is this really life happening, or am I self-sabotaging? Number 2 that I'm going to get into with not living out of your own truth versus self-sabotage. Second is escapism. Escapism. This is a huge one. Okay, first of all, in Western evangelical Christianity, escapism is lived out big. Okay, it's part of the doctrine. It's part of the theology of Western Christianity. Whether it's saying something like, we just need the gospel about systemic racism, or you're not living like Jesus to social justice activists, or this earth is only temporary and we're going to be raptured anyway to climate change issues. Escapism is a Western Christian foundational building block. But escapism is not a biblical way of life. Then there's the personal escapists. You binge spends. Give me a thumbs up if you're feeling this. You binge spends, okay? Or binge eat, or binge watch, or binge drink. And maybe you're doing it all at the same time. You got the Amazon going. You got that big Olivia Pope glass of wine going while you're shoving a brownie down your throat and watching a Netflix series, okay? Binge spend, binge eat, binge watch, binge drink, all in the attempt of escaping. Maybe you believe your life is one of restraint or sacrifice or scarcity. I remember one time, hey Barika, good to see you, honey, binging anime. That's the way I play for Becca say it. That's funny. Jim says, definitely guilty. Definitely guilty of the binge, eat, watch all at the same time. Sure, because when you binge, let's just get it all going at the same time, for sure. The ministry I used to work at in Brooklyn, one of the things that I did there, thankfully, because it was my first ministry experience, and it was a very intense ministry, is I kind of watched what other people did that didn't work for me and said to myself, I need to make sure I don't do that, okay? And so one of the things I noticed very early on is when people would go on vacation in this ministry, they would be counting down the minutes of vacation, and then they would literally run away. And I remember one family called me and said, hey, Donna, I don't know if I turned off the oven in my house. Can you go check it? And I went and got the spare key, and I walked into their house, and they were going to be gone for 2 weeks, and there was food everywhere. There was milk on the counter left out. Like the house looked like a bomb blew up in it. They literally ate, threw stuff in the suitcase, and ran away, okay? And that is no way to go on a vacation. But the thinking there was you are paying such a price and working so hard that you had to run away to escape. Serving the Lord with joy, not so much. Sleeping when you're dead was the ongoing tagline of the ministry. You'll sleep when you're dead. And everyone's bodies and hearts knew that serving God in that way wasn't really truth. So all kinds of escape artists came, whether it was escaping into drugs or alcohol or unhealthy behavior or running away, or all kinds of escape mentality and behavior started to happen there. So what are you believing that is counter to truth? Because your heart knows the truth. Your heart really does know the truth. Let me see a couple of your... Rebecca says, I do binge TV a lot as a coping mechanism, but it doesn't have as much because adult responsibilities are doing the most. Okay, that's cool. And again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying downtime. Believe me, I'm not talking about relaxation. I'm not talking about rhythms of rest like Sabbath. I'm not talking about the need to disconnect. I know Aaron just went on a Facebook Sabbath rest. Right? All these things are healthy. Vacations are healthy. All of it is healthy, but it's the way we do it. And when we escape, that's not as healthy, right? When we escape reality, that's not as healthy. I'm reading a Martha Beck book. I talked about this last week called The Way of Integrity. And she's using the definition of integrity as the second definition in the dictionary, which is wholeness. Like the integrity of a ship or a bridge, it has structural integrity. And where there is integrity, wholeness, where that exists, security and trust can be placed. In the book, she uses the phrase walk back the cat in order to kind of evaluate what we're talking about here. Walk back the cat. It's a term used in the intelligence community and the military intelligence community for a process to understand the true nature of a situation. In other words, when something goes sideways, they walk back the cat. And it's in order to, they reconstruct events chronologically from the present to the past. Now, do you ever do this? Walk back the cat, go backwards, reliving the event? So let's take the woman with the leak under the sink. And this is what Jim was asking, like, could this just be life happening? Let's take her, because I actually did walk back the cat with her before I knew what walk back the cat really meant, okay? So she's all dressed and she's ready and she's sitting at her kitchen table and she's drinking her coffee when she notices the leak coming out of the sink underneath the cupboard, just a drip. She opens up the doors, and instead of just putting a bucket under it, because the bucket would have held for a whole day, let alone just a couple hours, she starts moving everything from under the sink and grabbing a wrench. So I asked her what happened, and we went to this scene first. And I said, when you grabbed the wrench, what were you thinking? And here's what she said. I don't want to clean up this mess. I'm always having to clean up after everything. I need to fix this now so I don't have to do what I don't want to do later. Now, that wasn't actually the truth of what was happening there. But she went to that, again, because of where she was at. So let's go back one more scene. I asked her what happened before that. You're getting dressed. What are you thinking? And here's what she told me. I hate this pressure. I know I'm going to do well in the interview. I know I'll probably get the job, but I'm exhausted with being perfect. I have to work twice as hard because I'm a woman of color. And I'm tired of having to work so hard. But I have to because I owe it to my family who invested in my education, and I owe it to all the women who come after me like me. Here's the drop. If she cannot shift her belief system, that means the way that she relates to this high pressure work culture, if she can't shift the way she relates to this work culture, the culture is not for her, because she can't function in this culture in a healthy way. So she either needs to find a culture that is healthy for her, or she needs to be able to change her thinking of how she relates and functions in that culture. One of those two things has to happen. If she stays in a culture that's going to be unhealthy for her, she will continue to self-sabotage and probably not even realize why. Hey, Evelyn, great to see you, honey. Shabbat shalom. So let's see what Jim says. Sounds very much like game theory and political science. Kind of, right, Jim? Yeah, kind of. So when you walk back the cat, as the saying goes, which is, again, chronologically going back and asking yourself the question, what was I thinking there? And by the way, that's the Lamentations verse. Examine and test in order to turn towards God. That's exactly what that is. When you walk back the cat and zero in on the moment that you left your own integrity, again, the definition of integrity is wholeness, which is security. What you were feeling that are the triggers to self-sabotaging or escapism comes out. And when you see what you were feeling and you say it out of your mouth, again, because remember that word picture, part of examining, like Lamentations tells us, is saying it out of our mouth. We asked ourselves two important questions, and they are said by Byron Katie, who is a life coach. Question number one, is this true? Is what I'm thinking true? Question number 2. Can you absolutely know this is true? Okay? So, again, the verse says we analyze and we test. Is what I'm thinking true? So let's look back at the young woman who felt like she was overwhelmed because she had to live in it, being perfect, because she was carrying the weight of all the women of color that would come behind her and the weight of her family's expectations, and she was tired of being perfect and cleaning up after everybody else, right? So you would ask her, is that true? Do you have to be perfect? Even if people expect it of you, do you have to be perfect? And question number 2, can you absolutely know that you have to be perfect? So you ask yourself twice, really, is what the thing is. Proverbs 20:27, one of my favorite verses. The human spirit is a lamp of Adonai. It searches one's inmost being. Let's read that one more time. This is really an encouraging verse, one of my favorites for decades. The human spirit is a lamp of Adonai. It searches one's inmost being. So here's the truth. Our hearts are shining Yahweh's light. We can feel it. We align ourselves with our truth. We know it. Our heart is showing us what that truth is. We don't have to say when we hear something like this, well, I'm not sure, I don't know. You do know. Your heart knows. Your heart is the light of truth, okay? So we have to simply connect with that. And how do we do that? What we talked about in the beginning with Lamentations, we examine and test. We prod, we poke, we speak, okay? And that's how we know. So we align ourselves with our truth. Maybe it's a lifestyle shift. Maybe we have to actually change up what our jobs are, or where we live, or who we're dating. Maybe it's a lifestyle shift. Maybe it's a value shift. It's not so much that we have to change our job or who we're dating or where we live. It's more how we do that. Meaning we don't need to change what we do, but rather how we do it. Are you with me? But we confront the things that are not aligned with our truth. We trust our hearts and we use our mouths, and that is our healthy protection. Now, many of us are afraid to do this, okay? We're very afraid to speak and to examine and to test. This is an amazing quote. It's actually part of a poem that he wrote. We no longer need to fear arguments, confrontations, or any kind of problems with ourselves or others. Even stars collide, and out of their crashing, new worlds are born. You know how scientists say that, and Joni Mitchell also says that we are made of stardust, right? Literally, that's the stuff that was used in our creation. That was caused by collision. And many of us are so afraid of confrontation and collision. But here's the thing. If we're not living according to our own integrity, we will start seeing consequences. Maybe it's self-sabotage. Maybe it's escapism, where we do behaviors that are not healthy for us or our loved ones. There will be coincidence, or there will be consequences, rather, by not living our own integrity. And so we've got to connect to what that really is. And we have to confront what is not our truth. So we're going to close this time with the lighting of the Shabbos candles. And traditionally, the mothers of the home light the Sabbath candles that symbolize light and peace and joy. And what a wonderful time now as we're entering into the Sabbath to take this moment to examine and to reflect and to open up our hearts and to allow that light to shine truth. And then the mothers encircle the candles 3 times traditionally, which is simply a gesture that welcomes in the Sabbath. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, who is all truth and who leads us in paths of our own integrity. Shabbat Shalom.